Deseret, Utah Territory, 1857. The origins of the Meadows Massacre can be found in Caldwell County, Missouri. In October 1838, a great wolf hunt was called in Wausau, Illinois. It was known that the wolves to be hunted were the Mormons, and on the 30th at Haun's Mill, Missouri, 17 Mormons and one non-Mormon sympathizer lay dead from the actions of 250 militiamen. Several years later, when the Mormon prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram were killed, the Mormons fled west to Mexican territory. After the American-Mexican War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo made Utah Territory a part of the United States. In 1849, Brigham Young proposed the huge State of Deseret. This was never recognized by the United States. Instead, the U.S. created Utah Territory, a region much closer to the Utah's present size. Beginning in 1851, a number of federal officers fled the territory for the safety of the East. Some of these officials claimed that they feared for their physical safety and their very lives. The stories of these runaway officials convinced the new president that the Mormons were in a state of rebellion. One of the most influential informants was William W. Drummond. His stories made Washington circles claiming the LDS Church under Brigham Young were committing murder, destruction of federal court records, harassment of federal officers, and slandering the federal government. Countering Drummond was Utah's unsolicited chronicler, John Williams Gunnison. Gunnison was a land surveyor who had been to Utah in 1849 and published a book. It had been well received in Washington, D.C. and the East, but was despised by the Mormons in Utah. In 1853, Gunnison was called upon to again survey Utah Territory, this time for a route for a Pacific Railroad between the 38th and 39th parallels. Gunnison had entered Utah in the midst of the Walkera War, a loosely fought and sometimes bloody conflict between the Mormons and the Ute chief Walkera. On the morning of the 26th of October, 1853, Gunnison and 11 men in his party were attacked by a band of Pavans, in which Gunnison and 7 of his men were killed. After the killings, rumors circulated that the Pavans acted in consort with Danites, or destroying angels, Mormons under the direction of Brigham Young. Gunnison's letters to his wife, Martha, throughout the expedition, left her with the impression that the Mormons were the directors of her husband's murder. She wrote to Associate Justice W. W. Drummond for help. She received confirmation of this belief from Drummond, who drew his conclusions from informant and witness testimonies in several trials after the murders. However, Drummond was a stench in the Utah Territory. He had introduced Mrs. Drummond to Mormon social circles, when in fact she was Ada Carroll, a prostitute from Washington. It then became public knowledge that Drummond had deserted his wife and children at Oquawka, Illinois, with a letter from the real Mrs. Drummond published in the Deseret News. In Kansas, the Free Staters and border ruffians reigned supreme in violence. On the 21st of May, 1856, a posse of 800 Southerners sacked Lawrence, Kansas. While in the United States Senate, Charles Sumner was caned by Preston Brooks for saying the act was like the rape of a virgin and other coarse language. During the springtime of bloodshed, John Brown massacred 5 men on the night and morning of the 24th and 25th of May in what was to be called the Potawatomi Massacre, and still no federal troops were called out. In April 1857, the Baker-Fancher Party headed out for California, leaving Carroll County, Arkansas. The party was well outfitted with wagons, traveling carriages, and a large herd of cattle estimated at close to 1,000 head, along with oxen and numerous horses. Many were moving permanently to California, while others were simply drivers, driving cattle west for profit and planning to return back home to Arkansas. On the 13th of May, 1857, Parley P. Pratt was murdered by Hector McLean for stealing Hector's wife Eleanor and kidnapping his 2 sons and daughter. The news of his death in Arkansas was spreading throughout the Utah Territory, and by June 1857 was published in the Deseret News. President James Buchanan's administration sought to quell a supposed rebellion in Utah Territory by Mormon settlers. This rebellion was confirmed only by rumor and a few fleeing federal officers. Buchanan sent U.S. Armed Forces to staunch this rebellion while nothing was done in Kansas. This action would have peculiar consequences and was to become known as the Utah Expedition, or Buchanan's Blunder. And on the 11th of September, 1857, Mormons, in a place called Mountain Meadows, would murder a wagon train of migrants from Arkansas. To be continued.